5 respected Amish elders vanished without a trace from the heart of Lancaster County in the bitter winter of 2002. The community's spiritual leaders had gathered for their monthly council meeting at the small annex building on the Lapp farm, but when darkness fell, none returned home. The bishop, 2 ministers, and 2 deacons, pillars of their community for decades, had disappeared into the winter night. Inside the meeting room, the scene was disturbing. The bishop's Bible lay open to the book of Revelation. 5 cups of tea sat half empty and cold on the table. Their chairs were pushed back haphazardly, as if they had left in a hurry. Their buggies remained in the yard, the horses gone, taken by the men when they departed. No one in the community could understand why 5 respected elders would abandon their meetings so abruptly, or where they might have gone on that freezing January night. For months, the tight-knit Amish searched in their own quiet way, reluctant to involve outside authorities until desperation forced their hand. But even when English police investigated, they found nothing. No clues, no witnesses, no answers. The case went cold, and the community was left to wonder what happened to their spiritual fathers. Then, exactly 10 months later, during a barn raising for a young Amish family, workers clearing debris from a recent lightning strike uncovered something unexpected. Hidden beneath charred timbers lay evidence that would lead them to a terrible truth, to an abandoned property miles away, and down to a sealed basement where 5 bodies lay in their Sunday best, their remains telling the horrific truth of how they died, and why someone had gone to extraordinary lengths to hide them. If you've ever wondered what secrets lie buried in America's most private communities, this story will chill you to the bone. The Amish are known for their separation from the modern world, but even their isolated communities aren't immune to the darkest aspects of human nature. Before we continue this harrowing tale, take a moment to subscribe to Last Seen Stories so you never miss our investigations into America's most baffling disappearances. Where are you watching from today? Let us know in the comments below. Now, let's return to Lancaster County, where the truth about what happened to the elders would shake the very foundation of Amish faith and tradition. The autumn sun cast long shadows across Noah Stoltzfus's beard as he stood on the porch of his modest farmhouse. At 34, Noah carried himself with the quiet dignity his father had once possessed. His father, Deacon Abram Stoltzfus, one of the 5 missing elders. Noah ran his calloused hand along the porch railing his father had crafted years ago, the wood smooth from seasons of sun and rain. 10 months had passed since that January evening when his father failed to return home. 10 months of wondering, praying, and slowly accepting that perhaps God had called his father home in some mysterious way. The community had grieved together, appointed new elders, and continued their simple way of life. Inside the house, Noah could hear his mother preparing breakfast, the familiar sounds of metal spoons against ceramic bowls, the soft thud of dough being kneaded. Ruth Stoltzfus had aged a decade in these 10 months, her once vibrant face now lined with grief, her movements slower, her smiles rarer. But Noah had never fully accepted the disappearance. Unlike most of his brethren who viewed the tragedy as God's will, Noah found himself caught between faith and doubt. As he watched his mother wither from grief, Noah silently questioned whether they should have done more to find answers. "It's almost time," Ruth called from inside. "You'll be late for the raising." Noah straightened his black suspenders and adjusted his straw hat. Across the rolling fields, he could see the Hochstetler farm, where today's barn raising would take place. Nearly 200 Amish men had gathered from 3 districts to help rebuild after a lightning strike had burned the original structure to the ground. Women bustled about, preparing the feast that would follow the day's labor. Noah joined the men gathering around Eli Hochstetler, the master carpenter, who was assigning tasks. Beyond the activity, he could see the rolling farmland that had sustained their community for generations. The distant clip-clop of buggy wheels on pavement, the absence of power lines, the simplicity of their existence, all remained unchanged despite the tragedy that had struck their leadership. "Noah," Eli called, his voice carrying across the yard. "Your skill with foundations is needed. You'll lead the team clearing the remaining debris and preparing the ground." Noah nodded, grateful for the distraction of physical labor. As he gathered his tools and the younger men who would assist him, his thoughts drifted to his father. Deacon Abram had been a skilled builder himself, teaching Noah everything from setting a perfect square to judging the quality of soil beneath a foundation. What Noah couldn't know as he began clearing the charred remnants of the old barn was that today's simple task would unearth far more than stone and soil. By sundown, the community's carefully maintained peace would be shattered, and Noah would find himself at the center of a mystery that had been literally buried beneath their feet. Noah remembered the day of the disappearance with painful clarity. January 15th, 2002, a Tuesday like any other, except for the monthly Elder Council meeting. His father had left before dawn, his breath visible in the winter air as he guided their buggy down the lane. The meeting might run late, Abram had told his wife, Ruth. Don't wait supper. Abram's final words to his son had been practical advice about repairing a broken fence. Nothing prophetic, nothing that suggested he knew he would never return home. Just ordinary words exchanged between father and son on what seemed an ordinary day. But when midnight came, and Abram still hadn't returned, Ruth had woken Noah. Together they'd harnessed the buggy and driven through swirling snow to the Lapp farm where the meeting was to be held. The silent journey through the dark countryside seemed eternal. Noah remembered the creak of the buggy wheels on packed snow, the nervous snorts of our horse, the way the lantern light cast eerie shadows on the drifts piling along the roadside. His mother had clutched her shawl tightly around her shoulders, her face a mask of worry that she tried to hide behind murmured prayers. What they had found had confounded them. The meeting house, a simple addition to the Lapp property used for smaller gatherings, stood nearly empty. 5 Bibles lay open to the book of Revelation. 5 cups of tea sat half empty and cold on the table. Their chairs were pushed back haphazardly, as if they had left in a hurry. Their buggies remained in the yard, the horses gone, taken by the men when they departed. No one in the community could understand why 5 respected elders would abandon their meeting so abruptly, or where they might have gone on that freezing January night. For months, the tight-knit Amish searched in their own quiet way, reluctant to involve outside authorities until desperation forced their hand. But even when English police investigated, they found nothing. No clues, no witnesses, no answers. The case went cold, and the community was left to wonder what happened to their spiritual fathers. Then, exactly 10 months later, during a barn raising for a young Amish family, workers clearing debris from a recent lightning strike uncovered something unexpected. Hidden beneath charred timbers lay evidence that would lead them to a terrible truth, to an abandoned property miles away, and down to a sealed basement where 5 bodies lay in their Sunday best, their remains telling the horrific truth of how they died, and why someone had gone to extraordinary lengths to hide them. Now a Stoltzfus vanishes further behind the passive carpentry of his father. He hardens his consistency on the porch which his author no longer contributed to due to these 8 years of appeasement. His father, Deacon Abraham Stoltzfus, one of the 5 missing elders. He filled his scholared hand along the porch railing which his father had crafted years ago, the wood smooth from seasons of sun and rain. 10 months had passed since that January evening when his father failed to return home. 10 months of wondering, praying, and slowly accepting that perhaps God had called his father home in some mysterious way. The community had grieved together, appointed new elders, and continued their simple way of life. But Noah had never fully accepted the disappearance. Unlike most of his brethren who viewed the tragedy as God's will, Noah found himself caught between faith and doubt. As he watched his mother wither from grief, Noah silently questioned whether they should have done more to find answers. "It's almost time," Ruth called from inside. "You'll be late for the raising." Noah straightened his black suspenders and adjusted his straw hat. Across the rolling fields, he could see the Hochstetler farm, where today's barn raising would take place. Nearly 200 Amish men had gathered from 3 districts to help rebuild after a lightning strike had burned the original structure to the ground. Women bustled about, preparing the feast that would follow the day's labor. Noah joined the men gathering around Eli Hochstetler, the master carpenter, who was assigning tasks. Beyond the activity, Noah could see the rolling farmland that had sustained their community for generations. The distant clip-clop of buggy wheels on pavement, the absence of power lines, the simplicity of their existence, all remained unchanged despite the tragedy that had struck their leadership. "Noah," Eli called, his voice carrying across the yard. "Your skill with foundations is needed. You'll lead the team clearing the remaining debris and preparing the ground." Noah nodded, grateful for the distraction of physical labor. As he gathered his tools and the younger men who would assist him, his thoughts drifted to his father. Deacon Abraham had been a skilled builder himself, teaching Noah everything from setting a perfect square to judging the quality of soil beneath a foundation. What Noah couldn't know as he began clearing the charred remnants of the old barn was that today's simple task would unearth far more than stone and soil. By sundown, the community's carefully maintained peace would be shattered, and Noah would find himself at the center of a mystery that had been literally buried beneath their feet. Noah remembered the day of the disappearance with painful clarity. January 15, 2002, a Tuesday like any other, except for the monthly Elder Council meeting. His father had left before dawn, his breath visible in the winter air as he guided their buggy down the lane. The meeting might run late, Abraham had told his wife Ruth. "Don't wait supper." Abraham's final words to his son had been practical advice about repairing a broken fence. Nothing prophetic, nothing that suggested he knew he would never return home. Just ordinary words exchanged between father and son on what seemed an ordinary day. But when midnight came, and Abraham still hadn't returned, Ruth had woken Noah. Together they'd harnessed the buggy and driven through swirling snow to the Lapp farm where the meeting was to be held. The silent journey through the dark countryside had seemed eternal. Noah remembered the creak of the buggy wheels on packed snow, the nervous snorts of their horse, the way the lantern light had cast eerie shadows on the drifts piling along the roadside. His mother had clutched her shawl tightly around her shoulders, her face a mask of worry that she tried to hide behind murmured prayers. What they found had confounded them. The meeting house, a simple addition to the Lapp property used for smaller gatherings, stood nearly empty. 5 Bibles lay open to the book of Revelation. 5 cups of tea sat half empty and cold. The chairs were pushed back irregularly, as if the men had left in a hurry. Most puzzling of all, the men's buggies remained in the yard, but their horses were gone, as if they had ridden away on horseback, something highly unusual for elder Amish men, especially in the dead of winter. Bishop Levi Lapp, ministers Amos Zook and Daniel King, and deacons Abram Stoltzfus and Joseph Fisher had vanished without explanation. Perhaps they walked to the main house, Ruth had suggested, her voice thin with worry. But the Lapp farm's wife emerged from her home in her nightdress, alarmed by the late visitors.
"They never came to the house," she'd said, her face paling as she looked toward the empty meeting room. "I thought they were still in council." Over the following days, the community searched every road, field, and creek bed within miles. They'd checked neighboring districts, sent runners to relatives in other settlements. The Schrock property had been searched too, but the authorities had focused on the main house and intact outbuildings. The half-collapsed barn on the far edge of the property, burned years before in an electrical fire, had been barely noticed, let alone investigated. After 3 weeks, the families reluctantly contacted the Lancaster County Sheriff. Detective Thomas Miller led the investigation, interviewing dozens of community members, searching the surrounding areas with dogs and helicopters, but no evidence emerged. The case baffled law enforcement. 5 men couldn't simply disappear without leaving traces. "It's as if they walked out of their room and vanished," Detective Miller had told Noah during their final meeting. "We've exhausted every lead." The investigation gradually slowed, then stopped altogether. The community appointed new leadership and continued their ways, accepting the mystery as God's inscrutable will. Noah wasn't alone in his doubts. Hannah Fisher, daughter of Deacon Joseph, had voiced her suspicions privately, as had a few others. But community pressure to accept God's will was strong, and vocal questioning gradually faded as months passed. Noah had noticed inconsistencies in the detective's questions, sensed the sheriff's department hadn't taken the case as seriously as they might have if 5 Englishmen had disappeared. The detective had suggested the elders might have gone on a religious retreat or decided to start fresh elsewhere, ideas that showed a fundamental misunderstanding of Amish life and commitment. No Amish man would abandon his family without word, Noah had insisted. Especially not elders, especially not 5 at once. But his protests had fallen on deaf ears, both among the English authorities and eventually within his own community. Life continued. Seasons changed. Winter melted into spring, spring warmed to summer, and now autumn had returned, painting the countryside in russets and golds. Now, as Noah directed the young men clearing the last of the debris from the lightning strike, these thoughts receded to the background. The rhythmic work of excavation occupied his mind fully. They'd made good progress by mid-morning, the foundation area nearly cleared. "Noah," called Jeremiah Yoder, one of the youngest workers, "there's something strange here." Noah made his way to where Jeremiah stood, shovel in hand, pointing at something half-buried beneath a pile of charred timbers. "Probably just trash from the old barn," Noah said, kneeling to examine it. But as he cleared away more debris, Noah realized it wasn't ordinary farm refuse. It was a canvas satchel, partially burned but still intact, deliberately wedged between 2 foundation stones. "Keep clearing, but carefully," Noah instructed. As they removed more debris, Noah carefully extracted the satchel. It was weather-beaten, but had been protected from the worst of the fire by the stones around it. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, was a leathered journal with the name Isaiah Yoder stamped on the cover. Noah's pulse quickened. Isaiah Yoder had been the community's previous bishop, who had passed away 2 years before the disappearance. Why would his private journal be hidden in the Hochstetler barn foundation? Tucked inside the journal was a sealed envelope addressed to the Elders' Council in Bishop Yoder's distinctive hand, and beneath that, most puzzling of all, was a small stack of photographs showing men in English clothes standing beside surveyors on what appeared to be the Schrock property. "What is it?" Jeremiah asked, peering over Noah's shoulder. "I'm not sure," Noah replied, carefully returning the items to the satchel, "but I think it might be important." Noah tucked the satchel into his work coat, his mind racing. Bishop Yoder had died of natural causes before the current elders disappeared, but he had been deeply involved in the community's land disputes with outside developers. Had he hidden evidence that somehow connected to what happened to the 5 missing men? As Noah stood, he noticed Samuel Miller, the current bishop's brother-in-law, watching him intently from across the construction site. When their eyes met, Samuel quickly looked away and continued his conversation with 2 other older men. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of activity, but Noah's thoughts remained fixed on the hidden satchel. By midday, as the community gathered for the noon meal, he knew he needed to examine its contents more carefully, and he knew exactly who might help him understand their significance. Noah waited until the communal meal was well underway before slipping away from the crowded tables. Finding a quiet spot behind the Hochstetler woodshed, he carefully opened the satchel again. Bishop Yoder's journal was filled with neat, precise handwriting, documenting community matters, births, marriages, land transactions. But toward the end, the entries became more urgent, concerned with what Yoder called the English threat to our way of life. The final entries, dated just days before his death, mentioned multiple meetings with representatives from a company called Keystone Holdings about their plans to develop the Schrock property. Yoder had written, "They speak of compromise, but seek only our surrender. Their plans extend far beyond Schrock's land. Today, KH representative implied threats if we continue opposition. Must warn council of the danger these men present." The sealed letter was addressed to the council that would later disappear. Noah hesitated before breaking the wax seal, knowing he was violating the privacy of a bishop's communication. But after 10 months of unanswered questions about his father's fate, his need for answers outweighed tradition. Inside was a single page of warning. "To my brothers in faith, if you are reading this, I have been called to God's side, but I leave this warning. The men from Keystone Holdings are dangerous beyond measure. They have corrupted officials within the county. Their plans would destroy not just the Schrock land, but all adjoining properties, including much of our community's farmland. I have gathered evidence of their illegal methods and bribery of county officials. This evidence is hidden where English eyes will not find it, beneath the 3rd floorboard in the eastern corner of the old Schrock barn basement. Trust no English authorities in this matter, especially not those from the sheriff's department. May God guide you in protecting our people. Isaiah Yoder." Noah's hands trembled as he examined the photographs. They showed men in business suits standing with surveying equipment on Amish farmland. In one photo, a man in a sheriff's department uniform stood beside them, accepting what appeared to be an envelope. Though the image was slightly blurry, Noah recognized the profile: Detective Thomas Miller. The implications were staggering. If Bishop Yoder had discovered corruption involving Keystone Holdings and the sheriff's department, and the 5 elders had gone to recover his hidden evidence, Noah quickly returned the items to the satchel. He needed to share this information, but with whom? Samuel Miller's watchful gaze earlier had made him cautious about approaching the current leadership. Instead, his thoughts turned to Hannah Fisher, daughter of one of the missing deacons. Like Noah, she never fully accepted the official explanation of the disappearance. As the community began to disperse from the noon meal, Noah sought her out. Hannah was helping clear tables, her movements efficient and practiced. At 28, she carried herself with the quiet dignity of Amish womanhood, though grief had left its mark in the shadows beneath her blue eyes. "Could I speak with you privately?" he asked quietly, his voice barely audible above the general conversation. Hannah glanced at him, her eyes questioning, but nodded. She finished wiping her hands on her apron and followed him. They walked away from the gathered families, toward the edge of the orchard where their conversation wouldn't be overheard. "I found something today," Noah said, showing her the satchel and its contents. "Bishop Yoder left this before he died. I think it explains what happened to our fathers." As Hannah read the letter and examined the photographs, her composure faltered. "This connects the elder's disappearance to the Schrock property and to that detective who claimed to be helping us," she whispered. "Yes," Noah agreed, "and there's more. My father mentioned to me before he disappeared that the council was concerned about protecting community land. I thought he meant ordinary zoning disputes, but this suggests something far more serious." "My father said something similar," Hannah recalled. "He seemed worried about people who couldn't be trusted, though he wouldn't say who." Noah explained his theory that the 5 elders had gone to the Schrock property to retrieve Bishop Yoder's hidden evidence, perhaps lured there by Detective Miller under false pretenses. "We need to see what's in that barn basement," Hannah said, her voice firm despite her obvious fear. "If there's evidence there, or any sign of what happened to them." "It's dangerous," Noah warned. "If Miller and Keystone are involved in our father's disappearance, they wouldn't hesitate to silence anyone else who discovered the truth." Hannah's face showed her internal struggle. The Amish way was to submit to God's will, not to investigate crimes or seek justice through English means. But she, too, had lived with unanswered questions for 10 months. "When shall we go?" she asked simply. "Tonight," Noah decided. "After dark. We'll take my buggy to within half a mile, then approach on foot." As they returned to the barn raising, neither noticed Samuel Miller watching them from the shadow of the newly raised barn frame, his weathered face set in grim lines. The rest of the day passed in hard work, the barn's structure taking shape through the community's coordinated efforts. By sunset, the framework stood complete, ready for the roof raising scheduled for the following day. As the workers dispersed to their homes, Eli Hochstetler approached Noah. "You found something this morning," he said. It wasn't a question. Noah hesitated, uncertain how much to reveal. "Some old papers," he said carefully. "Nothing important." Eli studied him for a long moment. "Be careful, Noah," he said finally. "The past sometimes should stay buried." The cryptic warning lingered in Noah's mind as he returned home, tended to evening chores, and waited for full darkness. Had Eli been warning him away from danger or from truth? After ensuring his mother was asleep, Noah slipped out to the barn, harnessed his horse to the buggy, and drove to the crossroads where he had arranged to meet Hannah. She was already waiting, a small lantern at her feet, casting a pool of yellow light in the darkness. Together they set out toward the abandoned Schrock property, the rhythmic clop of hooves on pavement the only sound in the still autumn night. Neither spoke much, each lost in thoughts of what they might discover. The Schrock property stood abandoned and forbidding in moonlight. The 2-story farmhouse, its windows dark empty sockets, loomed over weed-choked fields, and behind it several outbuildings sagged with neglect, and at the property's edge the half-collapsed barn was barely visible against the tree line. Noah and Hannah left the buggy hidden in a grove of trees along the back road and approached on foot, their lanterns turned low. The only sounds were the rustle of dry leaves beneath their feet and the occasional distant call of a nightbird. "The barn is this way," Noah whispered, consulting the rough map he had drawn based on his memories of the property. He had been here as a child, when old Schrock still lived, but the place had changed in the years of abandonment. They moved cautiously through tall grass, skirting the main house. Hannah stumbled once over an unseen root, and Noah caught her arm, steadying her. Their eyes met briefly in the dim light, a moment of unspoken understanding passing between them.
The barn came into view, or what remained of it. The main structure had partially collapsed, its roof caved in on one side, walls leaning at precarious angles.
It had burned years ago, long before the elders' disappearance, in what the English authorities had ruled an electrical fire. "How do we get to the basement?" Hannah asked, surveying the ruined structure. "There should be an outside entrance on the east side. Many of the older barns have storm cellar doors." They circled the building until they found what they were looking for, a pair of slanted wooden doors set into the ground leading beneath the barn. The doors were secured with a rusted padlock that broke easily under pressure from the pry bar Noah had brought. The hinges creaked as Noah pulled the doors open, revealing stone steps descending into darkness. The smell that rose from below was musty and damp, but mercifully free of the stench of decay that would have confirmed their worst fears. "Stay behind me," Noah instructed, raising his lantern as he began to descend. The basement was surprisingly intact, protected from the fire and collapse that had damaged the upper structure. Stone walls held firm, and the ceiling, the barn's original floor, remained mostly solid despite the damage above. The space was cluttered with abandoned farm implements, crates, and the accumulated debris of decades. "The letter said the third floorboard in the eastern corner," Hannah reminded him, her voice hushed in the enclosed space. They made their way carefully to the eastern corner. Noah raised his lantern, examining the floor above them. Unlike the dirt floor they stood on, the barn's original floor was made of wide wooden planks. Counting from the corner, Noah identified the third board. "It looks loose," he observed, reaching up with the pry bar. The board came away easily, as if it had been removed and replaced many times before. Noah reached into the space and felt something wrapped in oilcloth, similar to the wrapping that had protected Bishop Yoder's journal. He carefully extracted the package and set it on a nearby crate. Inside was a leather portfolio containing documents, property records, maps, and what appeared to be financial statements for Keystone Holdings. Paper-clipped to these were several handwritten notes in Bishop Yoder's hand documenting conversations with county officials who had admitted to taking bribes from Keystone. "This is what the elders came for," Hannah said, scanning the documents. "Evidence of corruption." Noah nodded, continuing to examine the space where the package had been hidden. His fingers found something else, a small notebook, newer than the other documents. He pulled it out and opened it to find handwriting he didn't recognize. The notebook contained cryptic entries, mostly initials and dates, with occasional brief notes. "Meeting with AZ, refuses offer. LL becoming problem. Pressure family. KH wants resolution by month end. 5 stubborn old men standing in way of progress. January 15, final meeting scheduled. Will bring M to ensure cooperation." The entry stopped there. January 15, the day the elders vanished. "This wasn't Bishop Yoder's," Noah said, showing Hannah the notebook. "Someone else was here tracking the elders' movements." Hannah's face paled as she read the entries. "These are threats, and look at the initials. AZ must be Amos Zook, LL is Bishop Lapp." "And who is M?" Noah wondered aloud. The answer came in the form of a voice from the stairs behind them. "That would be me." They whirled to find Detective Thomas Miller standing at the bottom of the steps, his service weapon drawn and pointed steadily at them. The lantern light gleamed dully on the badge pinned to his jacket. "I've been watching this place since you started asking questions again, Stoltzfus. Should have known someone would eventually connect the dots." "You killed them?" Noah said, the words more statement than question. Miller's expression remained impassive. "I didn't intend for anyone to die. It was supposed to be a simple intimidation. Get them to stop opposing the development, sign some papers, go home. but they wouldn't cooperate, even when faced with the consequences. "What happened?" Hannah demanded, her voice shaking with anger. "They came here that night, thinking I was bringing them to meet with county officials who would help stop the development. Instead, they met representatives from Keystone. Things got heated. One of the Keystone men lost his temper, there was a struggle, then they decided no witnesses could be left." "Where are they?" Noah asked, his fists clenched at his sides. Miller gestured with his free hand toward a section of wall behind them. "See for yourself."
Noah turned, raising his lantern. What he had taken for a stone wall was actually a more recent construction, concrete blocks mortared together, unlike the fieldstone that formed the rest of the basement. "You walled them in?" Hannah whispered, horror evident in her voice. "Keystone's idea, not mine," Miller said. "I just helped clean up the mess. You know what the hardest part was? Disposing of those horses. Had to take them 20 miles away and sell them to an English farmer who didn't ask questions." Noah stepped toward the concrete wall, examining it closely. "They're in there? All 5 of them?" "What's left of them," Miller confirmed. "Now, both of you need to understand your situation. You found evidence that implicates some very powerful people who won't hesitate to add 2 more bodies to their count." "People like you," Hannah said, her voice steadier now. Miller smiled without humor. "I'm just a small part of this. Keystone Holdings has half the county officials in their pocket. Development means progress, jobs, tax revenue. A few Amish farmers standing in the way of that progress, well, sacrifices get made." "And now?" Noah asked, already calculating the distance between himself and Miller, wondering if he could reach the detective before the man could fire his weapon. "Now we have a problem. You know too much. But killing Amish in their own community is one thing. Killing them on abandoned property where no one will look for days is another." He gestured with his gun. "Both of you, move toward the stairs. We're going to take a drive." Noah met Hannah's eyes briefly, a silent communication passing between them. Then, with deliberate slowness, he began to move as directed, Hannah following behind him. "What about our people?" Noah asked, stalling for time as they approached the stairs. "They'll search for us, just like they searched for the elders." "And they'll find nothing, just like before," Miller said with confidence. "Now move." As they reached the bottom of the stairs, Noah stumbled slightly, dropping his lantern. The light flickered but didn't go out, casting wild shadows across the basement. "Pick it up," Miller ordered. Noah bent down slowly, his hand closing not around the lantern handle, but around a rusted length of pipe lying nearby. In one fluid motion, he straightened and swung the pipe toward Miller's arm. The detective fired, the shot deafening in the enclosed space, but Noah's blow connected, sending the gun flying from Miller's hand. Hannah scrambled for it, while Noah grappled with the detective, the 2 men crashing into a stack of crates that collapsed around them. Miller was stronger, but Noah fought with the desperate energy of a man defending not just his life, but the truth about his father's fate. They rolled on the dirt floor, trading blows until Hannah's voice cut through the chaos. "Stop! Both of you!" They looked up to find her holding Miller's gun, her hands shaking, but her aim steady enough. "Get up," she told Miller, slowly. The detective rose, blood trickling from a cut above his eye. "You won't shoot me," he said with certainty. "Your people don't believe in violence. We believe in justice and protecting the innocent." While Hannah kept the gun trained on Miller, Noah quickly gathered the evidence they'd found and stuffed it into his coat. "We need to go," he said urgently. "Others might come looking for him." "What about—" Hannah gestured toward the concrete wall. "We'll come back, I promise, with help." They forced Miller up the stairs and out into the night air. Using rope from their buggy, they bound his hands and feet.
"This won't stop anything," Miller told them as Noah tightened the final knot. "Keystone will still get what they want. They always do." "Not this time," Noah said firmly. "This time, the truth comes out." The question now was where to take their prisoner and the evidence they discovered. Not the local sheriff's department, which Miller had implied was compromised. Not their own community leaders, some of whom had been watching Noah suspiciously. They needed someone they could trust, someone outside local influence. The state police barracks, Hannah suggested, in the next county. They wouldn't be under Keystone's control. Noah nodded agreement. They loaded their bound prisoner into the buggy, covering him with a blanket to avoid attracting attention on the road. As they set off through the darkness, Noah's thoughts turned to his father and the other elders, sealed behind that concrete wall for 10 long months while their families grieved without closure. Justice would come, he vowed silently, for all of them. The journey to the state police barracks was tense and silent. Miller lay in the back of the buggy, occasionally testing his bonds but making no further attempts to speak. Noah drove with grim determination, while Hannah kept watch behind them for any sign of pursuit. They had traveled perhaps 5 miles when headlights appeared on the road behind them, approaching rapidly. "Someone's coming," Hannah warned. Noah urged the horse to a faster pace, but a buggy was no match for automobiles on the straight country road. Within minutes, 2 dark SUVs had caught up with them, forcing them to the shoulder. "Keystone Security," Miller called from the back, his voice triumphant. "Told you this wouldn't end here." 4 men emerged from the vehicles, all wearing dark clothing and grim expressions. One approached the buggy, his hand resting casually on what was clearly a concealed weapon beneath his jacket. "Detective Miller seems to have gotten himself into a situation," he observed, his tone conversational, but his eyes cold. "We'll take him from here. We know what happened to the elders. We found the evidence Bishop Yoder hid." The man's expression didn't change. "That's a serious accusation against respected businessmen and law enforcement officers. I suggest you forget what you think you know and go home to your families." "Like our fathers did?" Hannah challenged. The man sighed as if disappointed. "This is becoming unnecessarily complicated. Step down from the buggy, both of you." Noah and Hannah exchanged glances. They had no weapons, no means to fight 4 armed men. Slowly, they climbed down from the buggy. While 2 men freed Miller from his bonds, the leader continued addressing Noah and Hannah. "Here's what happens now. You return to your community and forget everything about tonight. We keep the evidence you collected. Everyone lives their quiet, separate lives." "And if we don't agree?" Noah asked. The man smiled thinly. "Then your community suffers another tragic disappearance. 2 this time." A sound in the darkness drew everyone's attention, the distinctive clip-clop of approaching horses. Around the bend in the road came 3 buggies, each carrying lanterns that illuminated the faces of the men inside. Elijah Lapp, Samuel Miller, and other senior members of the community. The Keystone men reacted instantly, reaching for their weapons, but hesitated at the sight of so many witnesses. Amish they might be, but a dozen witnesses to murder would be difficult to silence. The buggies pulled to a stop, forming a semicircle around the confrontation. Elijah Lapp, brother of the missing bishop, stepped down first. "We've been following you since you left the Schrock property," he told Noah and Hannah. "We knew it was only a matter of time before someone discovered the truth." "You knew?" Hannah asked incredulously. "About our fathers?" Samuel Miller nodded gravely. "Not everything, but enough to suspect what had happened. We've been gathering our own evidence, quietly, for months." The leader of the Keystone men interrupted. "This is a private matter." "No longer," came a new voice from beyond the circle of buggies. Headlights illuminated the scene as several patrol cars pulled up, officers emerging with weapons drawn. At their head was a tall, gray-haired man in a state police uniform. "State Police Captain Robert Thornton," he announced. "Everyone stay where you are." The Keystone men were quickly disarmed and detained. Miller, who had been edging toward one of the SUVs, was recaptured and handcuffed. Captain Thornton approached Noah and Hannah. "We received an anonymous tip an hour ago about a possible confrontation here involving the missing elders case. Looks like we arrived just in time." Noah looked toward Elijah and the other community elders, understanding dawning. "You called them." "We've been in contact with Captain Thornton for several months, after we found partial evidence of what happened to our brothers." "But you told no one," Hannah said, a note of accusation in her voice. "We couldn't, not until we were certain who could be trusted. Keystone's influence runs deep in our county." While state troopers secured the scene, Captain Thornton took statements from Noah and Hannah about what they had discovered in the Schrock barn basement. Noah handed over the evidence they had collected, explaining its significance. "This matches information we've been gathering on Keystone Holdings for some time. Allegations of corruption, bribery, even threats against other communities opposing their developments. But we've never had solid evidence connecting them to violence, until now. Our fathers are behind a concrete wall in that basement. They've been there for 10 months while we searched and grieved." Captain Thornton's expression softened. "We'll recover them properly, with dignity, and those responsible will face justice." As arrangements were made to secure the Schrock property and begin a proper investigation, Elijah approached Noah and Hannah, who stood slightly apart from the others. "You should know the full truth," he said quietly, "about why we kept our suspicions from the community." "We're listening," Noah replied, his tone neutral. 3 weeks after the disappearance, Samuel found a warning nailed to his door, a threat against any family that continued to oppose Keystone or investigate the elders' disappearance. 2 days later, his barn burned to the ground. "I remember," Hannah said. "We all thought it was an accident." "It was a message," Samuel continued, "one we understood clearly. If we pursued the truth openly, more of our people would suffer. So instead of going to authorities, we began our own quiet investigation. Those of us who had been close to the elders, who knew about their opposition to the development. We gathered what evidence we could, built relationships with state authorities beyond Keystone's influence." "And you said nothing to the families," Noah observed, unable to keep the hurt from his voice. "Let us believe they might still be alive somewhere." "A painful decision," Elijah acknowledged. "But we feared Keystone would target the families next if they showed any sign of pursuing the truth. Better heartache than more deaths." "We were close to bringing everything to light," Samuel added. "Captain Thornton needed just a little more evidence before he could move against Keystone and the corrupt officials. Then you found Bishop Yoder's hidden records and everything accelerated." Hannah studied the older men thoughtfully. "You were watching us today. You knew we'd found something." "We've been watching the Schrock property for months," Elijah confirmed. "When we saw you heading there tonight, we alerted Captain Thornton and followed to ensure your safety." A state trooper approached, informing them that they would need to come to the barracks to give formal statements. As they prepared to leave, Noah turned to Elijah one last time. "What happens now to our community?" "Now we bring our brothers home," Elijah said simply. "We bury them with dignity and honor their sacrifice, and then we continue as we have always done, separate from the world but not blind to its dangers." As the first light of dawn broke over the eastern hills, Noah looked back toward the road leading to the Schrock property where his father and the other elders had met their end. Justice would come, but it would not be simple or painless. The quiet life their community had maintained for generations would be disrupted by investigations, perhaps even trials where Amish would be called to testify against English. Yet, as he helped Hannah into a patrol car that would take them to the state police barracks, Noah felt a weight lifting. The truth, however painful, was finally emerging from darkness into light. The state police barracks hummed with activity. a stark contrast to the quiet Amish world Noah and Hannah had left behind. Officers moved purposefully through hallways, phones rang constantly, and the harsh fluorescent lighting illuminated everything with unforgiving clarity. Captain Thornton had set them up in a small conference room rather than an interrogation room, a subtle acknowledgement of their status as witnesses rather than suspects. They had spent hours giving detailed statements about everything they had discovered. "What happens now?" Noah asked as Thornton reviewed their completed statements. "Now we move quickly. Based on your evidence and what your community elders have provided, we're securing warrants for Detective Miller, several Keystone executives, and 2 county officials. The FBI has been notified due to the corruption allegations crossing jurisdictional boundaries." "And our fathers?" Hannah asked quietly. Thornton's expression softened. "A forensics team is at the Schrock property now. Once they've documented everything, we'll remove the remains with all possible dignity. I understand your community will want to handle funeral arrangements according to your traditions." Noah nodded, grateful for the sensitivity. "How long will this take?" "The investigation? Months, likely. These kinds of cases are complex, but recovering your fathers should happen within days once the site is properly documented." A knock at the door interrupted them. A younger officer entered, handing Thornton a folder before withdrawing discreetly. "The preliminary report from the Schrock property," Thornton explained, scanning the contents. His expression grew troubled. "There's something you should know." Noah and Hannah exchanged glances, bracing themselves for more difficult news. "The forensics team has removed part of the concrete wall. They've confirmed human remains are present, but—" He hesitated. "But what?" Hannah pressed.
They've only found 4 bodies so far. The statement hung in the air between them, its implications slowly sinking in. 4? Noah repeated. There were 5 elders who disappeared. Could they have made a mistake? Hannah suggested. Perhaps overlooked. Forensics teams don't make those kinds of mistakes, Thornton said. They'll continue searching the entire basement, of course, but as of now, they've only located 4 bodies. Noah's mind raced. Who's missing? They can't make positive identifications yet, Thornton replied. That will take time, but based on height and build estimates and the personal effects found with the remains, he consulted the report again. They believe the missing person may be Deacon Joseph Fisher, Hannah's father. She stared at Thornton, color draining from her face. That's not possible, she whispered. They all disappeared together. They were all there that night. We'll continue investigating, Thornton assured her. There could be many explanations. Perhaps he was disposed of separately for some reason. But Noah could see another possibility forming in Hannah's eyes, one too painful to voice aloud. If her father's body wasn't with the others, could he somehow have survived, been held elsewhere, or worse, been involved in what happened? Before they could discuss it further, another officer appeared at the door, his expression urgent. Captain, we've got a situation. The Lancaster County Sheriff just arrived with a warrant for these 2. He nodded toward Noah and Hannah. What kind of warrant? Thornton demanded, standing. Obstruction of justice, tampering with evidence, assaulting an officer. Detective Miller filed the charges an hour ago. Thornton's jaw tightened. Stall them, he ordered. Call the State Attorney General's office. These witnesses are under state protection as part of an ongoing investigation. As the officer hurried out, Thornton turned back to Noah and Hannah. This is exactly why we've been building our case carefully. Keystone and their allies are using their remaining influence to fight back. They know we're close to breaking the whole thing open. What does this mean for us? Noah asked. It means you can't go home, not yet.
until we've secured the proper protections. If Lancaster County gets custody of you, I can't guarantee your safety." Hannah had remained silent, still processing the news about her father. Now she looked up, her expression resolute despite her obvious distress. "We need to speak with our community elders. They should know about the fourth body." "I'll arrange it," Thornton promised. "But first, we need to move you to a secure location." Within the hour, Noah and Hannah found themselves being escorted to a small motel 30 miles away, where 2 state troopers would maintain a protective watch. As they left the barracks through a side entrance, they glimpsed a confrontation in the main lobby. Lancaster County Sheriff deputies arguing heatedly with state police officers. The motel was modest but clean, with adjoining rooms for Noah and Hannah and a small common area where the troopers maintained their post. It was unlike anything either of them had experienced. Electric lights that turned on with a switch, a television, which they left unplugged, running water that came hot from taps. "How long will we need to stay here?" Hannah asked the female trooper who had been assigned to them. "Just until the jurisdictional issues are resolved. Captain Thornton is working to get emergency protective orders from a judge. Shouldn't be more than a day or 2. Left alone in the common area, Noah and Hannah sat in uncomfortable silence, the events of the past 24 hours weighing heavily on them. "It doesn't make sense. Why would my father not be with the others?"
Noah chose his words carefully. There could be many explanations. Perhaps he tried to escape or was separated from the others for some reason. Or perhaps he wasn't there at all, Hannah said, voicing the unthinkable. Perhaps he was involved somehow. "No," Noah said firmly. "Your father was a good man, a faithful deacon. He wouldn't betray the others or our community." Hannah's eyes filled with tears. "Then where is he, Noah? Where has he been for 10 months while we grieved?" Before Noah could answer, a knock at the door announced the arrival of Elijah Lapp and Samuel Miller, escorted by one of the state troopers. Both men looked exhausted, their weathered faces showing the strain of the day's events. "Captain Thornton told us about the discovery at the barn," Elijah said without preamble, "about there being only 4 bodies." "What does it mean?" Hannah asked directly. "Could my father have survived somehow?" The older men exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them. "We don't know," Samuel admitted. "But there's something we haven't told you, something we've suspected for some time." "What?" Noah pressed. "There may have been a traitor among us," Elijah said heavily. "Someone who helped Keystone track the elders' activities, perhaps even helped lure them to the Schrock property that night." The accusation hung in the air, unthinkable, yet now spoken aloud. "Not my father," Hannah said, her voice shaking with emotion. "He would never—" "We don't believe it was Joseph," Samuel assured her quickly, "but someone in our community was working with Keystone. Notes we found, information that could only have come from inside our community." "If not my father, then who?" Hannah demanded. Again, the older men exchanged glances. "We had suspicions," Elijah said carefully, "but no proof. That's part of why we kept our investigations secret. We didn't know who could be trusted." "And now?" Noah asked. "Now we fear whoever it is knows we're close to the truth. The community is in danger, especially with you 2 under state protection. It suggests to Keystone that you found damning evidence." A thought occurred to Noah. "How did Keystone's men find us on the road tonight? We told no one where we were going." "A question we've been asking ourselves," Elijah admitted. "They must have been following you, or someone told them," Hannah finished. The implications were staggering. Someone close to them, someone in their own community, might have betrayed not only the 5 elders, but continued working with Keystone even after their deaths. "We need to go back to the community. Whoever this traitor is, they're still there, perhaps planning to destroy more evidence or threaten other families." "Captain Thornton won't allow it," Samuel warned, "not with Lancaster County trying to arrest you."
Then we'll find another way, Noah insisted. The answer to what happened to Hannah's father, to all our fathers, lies in our community. Someone knows the full truth. As they debated next steps, the female trooper entered with a message from Captain Thornton. The forensics team had completed their preliminary examination of the basement and confirmed only 4 bodies were present. However, they had found something else, a second passage. As they debated next steps, the female trooper entered with a message from Captain Thornton. The forensics team had completed their preliminary examination of the basement and confirmed only 4 bodies were present. However, they had found something else, a second passage, previously hidden behind shelving, leading from the basement to the woods beyond the property. "A way out," Hannah whispered, hope flickering in her eyes for the first time. "My father could have escaped." "Or been taken somewhere else," Noah cautioned, unwilling to raise false hope. "Either way," Elijah said, "this changes everything. If Joseph Fisher survived that night, he may be the key to identifying everyone involved, including the traitor in our community." As night fell over the unfamiliar motel, Noah stood at the window, looking out at the parking lot where state troopers maintained their vigilant watch. Somewhere out there, forces were mobilizing against them. Keystone executives desperate to cover their crimes, corrupt officials trying to protect themselves, and most disturbing of all, someone from their own community working against them from within. And somewhere, perhaps, was Joseph Fisher, dead or alive, but separate from his brothers in faith whose bodies had been sealed behind that concrete wall. The search for truth had become even more complex and far more dangerous. Dawn broke gray and misty over the motel. Noah had slept fitfully, his dreams filled with concrete walls and hidden passages. He found Hannah already awake in the common area, a cup of tea cooling before her, her expression troubled. "I've been thinking about my father all night. If he escaped, why wouldn't he come home? Why let us believe he was dead all these months?" "Perhaps he couldn't," Noah suggested gently. "Perhaps he was injured or hiding because he knew the danger wasn't over." Before Hannah could respond, the door opened to admit Captain Thornton, looking as though he hadn't slept at all. He carried a thick folder and wore the expression that suggested significant developments. "We've been busy overnight. Multiple search warrants executed, forensics working non-stop at the Schrock property, and some very interesting discoveries." He laid several photographs on the table. They showed the concrete wall in the barn basement partially dismantled, revealing the grim scene behind it. "As confirmed yesterday, we found 4 bodies. Preliminary examination suggests they died from a combination of sedation and carbon monoxide poisoning, consistent with being drugged and then exposed to smoke from a fire. The concrete wall was added afterward, likely to conceal the evidence." "And the hidden passage?" Hannah asked urgently. Thornton nodded. "It exists exactly as reported. It leads to a storm cellar exit about 50 yards from the barn, concealed by undergrowth. We found evidence it had been used the night of the disappearance. Fabric caught on a nail that matches Amish clothing, footprints preserved in the undisturbed earth of the passage." Hope flickered across Hannah's face. "So my father could have escaped." "It's possible," Thornton acknowledged, "but that's not all we found." He produced another photograph, this one showing a small metal box that had been concealed in the hidden passage. This was wedged behind a loose stone near the exit. Inside was this. He carefully removed a sealed plastic evidence bag containing a blood-stained handwritten note. The writing was cramped and hurried, but clearly legible. "If found, know that Miller betrayed us. Drugged tea, set fire. I escaped through passage. Others too sedated. J.K. from our community working with Keystone. Going to find proof. Tell families we." The note ended abruptly. "J.F.," Hannah whispered, recognizing her father's handwriting. Joseph Fisher. He did survive, at least long enough to write this. And he identified a traitor, Noah added grimly. J.K. from our community. Who is J.K.? Hannah and Noah looked at each other, mentally reviewing members of their community with those initials. Jacob King, Minister Daniel King's son. He works as a carpenter, but has regular contact with English businesses for supplies. That fits with another discovery, Thornton said, producing another document. We executed a search warrant at Keystone Holdings headquarters last night. Their financial records show regular payments to a J.K. Consulting over the past 2 years. The most recent payment was 3 days ago. So he's still active, still working for them, even after what they did to our elders. There's more, Thornton continued. Based on Detective Miller's phone records, he received a call from Jacob King's number yesterday afternoon, shortly before Keystone Security intercepted you on the road. The pieces were falling into place. Jacob King had been Keystone's inside man, providing information about the elders' activities, perhaps even helping lure them to the Schrock property that night. And he was still active, still reporting to Keystone, which meant, "Our community is in danger," Noah said urgently. "If King knows we've discovered the truth, he might try to destroy evidence or threaten the other elders who've been investigating." "We've already dispatched state troopers to your community," Thornton assured them, "and we're preparing to bring Jacob King in for questioning. But there's one more development you need to know about." He hesitated, as if unsure how to deliver the news. "What is it?" Hannah pressed. "We found blood evidence in the hidden passage, quite a lot of it. It matches the stains on your father's note. Forensics can't confirm identity yet, but the blood type is consistent with what we know of Joseph Fisher's medical records." The implication was clear. Hannah's father had been injured, perhaps seriously, during his escape. If he was wounded, where would he go? Not a hospital. They report gunshot or suspicious injuries to police. Is there someone in your community who treats serious injuries? Noah and Hannah exchanged glances, both thinking of the same person. Mary Yoder, Bishop Yoder's widow. She's a midwife, but also treats injuries and illnesses. She lives isolated at the edge of our district. And she would keep a secret if asked, especially if she believed the authorities were compromised. Thornton immediately began making arrangements to send officers to Mary Yoder's home. As he stepped outside to use his radio, Hannah turned to Noah, her expression torn between hope and fear. If my father survived but never came home? He must have had good reason. The note suggests he was gathering evidence against Jacob King and Keystone. He would have known that returning home might put your family in danger. For 10 months? Hannah questioned, the pain evident in her voice. Before Noah could respond, Thornton returned, his expression grim. "We've got a problem. Jacob King is gone. His wife says he left suddenly last night, taking their emergency funds. And we can't reach the officers we sent to Mary Yoder's farm. They're not responding to radio calls." Noah stood immediately. "We need to go there, now." "It's too dangerous," Thornton objected. "If King is there—"
"It's our community," Hannah interrupted, also rising. "Our people, and possibly my father. We're going, with or without your help." Thornton studied their determined faces and sighed. "I'll take you myself, with a full tactical team. But you stay in the vehicle until we secure the scene. Understood?" 20 minutes later, they were speeding toward the Amish community, sirens wailing and lights flashing on the convoy of state police vehicles. Noah and Hannah sat silently in the back of Thornton's unmarked car, each lost in thoughts of what they might find. Mary Yoder's farm came into view, a modest homestead set back from the main road, surrounded by apple orchards. 2 patrol cars were parked haphazardly in the drive, doors open, but no officers were visible. Thornton ordered Noah and Hannah to stay in the car while the tactical team deployed, approaching the house with weapons drawn. Through the windshield, they watched the officers clear the patrol cars first, then advance on the house, moving with practiced precision.
Minutes stretched like hours as they waited. Finally, Thornton approached their car, his expression unreadable. The house is secure. 2 officers down, alive but sedated. Mary Yoder is inside, also drugged but conscious. And he hesitated. "My father?" Hannah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Thornton nodded. "He's alive. Weak, recovering from old injuries, but alive. And he's asking for you." Hannah was out of the car before Thornton could finish, Noah close behind her. They rushed past the tactical team securing the scene and into the simple farmhouse where paramedics were already attending to the injured officers. In a small bedroom at the back of the house, propped up on pillows in a narrow bed, was Deacon Joseph Fisher. He was thin, his beard longer and wider than Hannah remembered, his face lined with pain and exhaustion. But his eyes lit up as his daughter entered the room. "Hannah," he whispered, his voice weak but clear. "My child." Hannah fell to her knees beside the bed, taking her father's hand in hers. "Father," she sobbed, "we thought you were dead, all this time." "I nearly was," Joseph said, his free hand touching her hair gently. "The night at the Schrock barn, I was by the door when Miller put something in our tea. I noticed and only pretended to drink. When the others fell unconscious and Miller's Keystone friends started the fire, I managed to escape through the passage." "But you were injured," Noah observed, noting the older man's weakness. Joseph nodded. "Shot as I fled. I knew I couldn't go home. They would be watching. Mary took me in, treated my wounds. By the time I recovered enough to travel, I learned that Jacob King was watching all our families, reporting to Keystone. If I returned, everyone would be in danger." "So you stayed hidden," Hannah said, understanding dawning, "and gathered evidence against them." "Yes," Joseph confirmed. "Mary helped me. We collected documents, recorded conversations when King met with Keystone men nearby. We were nearly ready to take everything to authorities outside the county when you found Bishop Yoder's hidden evidence." "And King realized the truth was coming out," Noah finished. Joseph's expression darkened. "He came here last night, desperate. Said Keystone was falling apart, people being arrested. He wanted the evidence we'd gathered, threatened Mary. When the state police arrived, he drugged their coffee and fled, but not before injecting both of us with sedatives as well." "Did he get the evidence?" Thornton asked from the doorway. A faint smile crossed his pale face. "No. Mary and I hid everything too well. It's beneath the floorboards in the root cellar, enough to convict King, Miller, and every Keystone executive involved in the Elders' murders." As paramedics prepared to transport Joseph to a hospital, he gripped Hannah's hand tightly. He told her, "I wanted to come home every day," his eyes filling with tears, "to tell you and your mother I was alive. But I couldn't risk your safety until Keystone was destroyed and King exposed."
"I understand now," Hannah assured him, her own tears flowing freely. "You were protecting us, just as you always have." Outside, more state police vehicles arrived. An officer reported to Thornton that roadblocks had been established on all roads leading out of the county, but so far, there was no sign of Jacob King. "He won't get far," Thornton assured Noah and Hannah as they watched Joseph being loaded into an ambulance. "Not with every law enforcement agency in the state looking for him." "What happens now?" Noah asked, watching the ambulance drive away, Hannah following in a patrol car. "Now we bring your fathers home," Thornton said simply. "All of them. Justice will be served, both for the dead and the living." As Noah prepared to follow Hannah to the hospital, he looked back at Mary Yoder's farm, an unassuming place that had sheltered a survivor and preserved the truth through 10 long months of waiting. Somewhere in the county, Jacob King was running, his betrayal exposed, and somewhere beyond, the spirits of 4 elders might at last find peace in the knowledge that their sacrifice had not been in vain. The truth, so long buried behind concrete walls and layers of deception, had finally emerged into the light. The funeral for the 4 elders took place 2 weeks later, after the medical examiner completed the necessary examinations and released their remains to the families. Unlike typical Amish funerals, which follow quickly after death, this one required special consideration given the circumstances. The morning dawned clear and cool, the October sun casting long shadows across the rolling farmland. Buggies arrived from before sunrise, forming a solemn procession along the country roads leading to the community cemetery. The entire community gathered at the cemetery behind the meeting house. 4 plain wooden coffins, crafted by the men of the community, sat beside 4 freshly dug graves. No headstones would mark these resting places, only simple wooden markers that would eventually weather away, as was the Amish custom. Noah stood beside his mother, supporting her as she gazed at the coffin containing his husband's remains. Behind them, hundreds of Amish from their district and neighboring communities stood in respectful silence. The women wore black dresses and prayer caps, the men dark suits and broad-brimmed hats. No flowers adorned the coffins, just simple pine boxes, unvarnished and unadorned, reflecting the humility that had guided these men in life. Most striking of all was the presence of Joseph Fisher, still weak but insistent on attending, supported by Hannah and his wife. Many in the community still looked at him with wonder, as if seeing a ghost. His survival had been explained to the community in simple terms, without details of the investigation that was still ongoing. Bishop Hostetler, who had replaced Bishop Lapp after the disappearance, conducted the service in Pennsylvania Dutch, speaking of resurrection and God's mysterious ways. He made no mention of murder or English justice. Those matters belonged to the world outside their faith. "These men lived in faith," the bishop intoned, his voice carrying across the silent gathering. "They died in faith. We commend their souls to God's mercy and their memory to our hearts." Noah watched as the coffins were lowered slowly into the earth. The sound of dirt hitting wood as the first shovelfuls covered his father's coffin struck him physically, like a blow to the chest. He felt his mother tremble beside him, but she remained standing, her grief contained within the boundaries of their faith. As the graves were filled, hymns rose from the gathered community, ancient songs, sung without accompaniment, the harmonies pure and haunting in the morning air. Noah found his own voice joining the others, the familiar words bringing a measure of peace he hadn't expected.
As the community began to disperse following the service, Noah noticed a group of figures standing at a respectful distance beyond the cemetery fence. Captain Thornton and several other state police officers, heads bowed in solidarity with the community they had helped. The English newspapers had indeed published the story, with headlines declaring corrupt officials charged in Amish elders' murder and development scheme leads to multiple arrests. But out of respect, or perhaps due to Thornton's influence, no reporters or cameras intruded on their funeral. After the ceremony, as the community began to disperse, Captain Thornton approached Noah and Hannah, who stood with Joseph Fisher. "I wanted you to know," he said quietly, "we captured Jacob King attempting to cross into Canada yesterday. He's already offering to testify against his Keystone associates in exchange for consideration in sentencing." "How many have been arrested?" Noah asked. 17 so far," Thornton replied. "Detective Miller, 6 Keystone executives, 3 county officials, and several others involved in the conspiracy. The case is solid, especially with Joseph's testimony and the evidence you discovered." Joseph Fisher nodded gravely. "I will speak the truth, though it brings our community unwanted attention. Those men took the lives of my brothers in faith. There must be consequences. The state prosecutor assures me they'll respect your community's ways as much as possible.
Testimony will be taken with minimal disruption and your privacy protected to the extent the law allows." As Thornton departed, Noah looked toward the fresh graves of his father and the other elders. "It still doesn't seem real," he admitted. "All these months, the truth was literally buried while we searched and grieved. And yet the truth found its way to light, as it always does in God's time." Hannah, who had been silent throughout the exchange, finally spoke. "What happens to our community now? So much has changed." Her father squeezed her hand gently. "We continue as we have always done. We work our fields, raise our families, worship our God. The outside world touched us briefly, brought both pain and justice, but it does not change who we are." In the months that followed, life in the Amish community gradually returned to its familiar rhythms. Fields were tended, meals prepared, prayers offered. The trials of those responsible for the elders' deaths proceeded through the English justice system, with minimal disruption to Amish daily life. 6 months after the funeral, as spring began to green the fields, Noah stood at his father's grave in the early morning light. The winter snows had melted, and the simple wooden marker remained steady in the softening ground. "The first trial ended yesterday," he said quietly, as if his father could hear. "Miller and 2 Keystone executives received life sentences. The others will be tried next month. Joseph's testimony was powerful. Even the English newspaper said so." He knelt, placing a small stone atop the grave marker, a private remembrance that would remain long after the wooden marker had weathered away. "The development plans have been permanently abandoned. The Schrock property and surrounding lands have been placed in a conservation trust. They can never be developed now." A buggy approached on the nearby road. Hannah, on her way to help Noah's mother with spring cleaning. She had grown closer to Noah through their shared experience, their friendship deepening into something neither had yet named, but both recognized. She raised a hand in greeting, but continued on, giving him his private moment. Noah stood, brushing soil from his knees. "The new Elder Council meets tonight. They've asked me to consider training for deacon in time. I'm not sure I'm worthy to follow in your footsteps, but I'll try to honor what you stood for." As he walked back toward the road, Noah looked across the rolling farmland that had been saved by his father's sacrifice. The early morning sun illuminated fields newly plowed, the distant figures of his people at work, buggies moving unhurriedly along country lanes.
Their way of life continued, fundamentally unchanged despite the intrusion of the outside world. In this, perhaps, lay the greatest victory, and the most fitting memorial to 4 men who had given everything to preserve it, and 1 who had survived to ensure justice was served. For in the end, the elders' disappearance had revealed not just a crime, but also the strength of a community willing to seek truth, face darkness, and still retain the faith that had guided them for generations. Their story would not be forgotten, even as life moved forward in the quiet rhythm of their chosen path.